All righty. Welcome to this edition of Monitoring the Pulse. As always, I am your host, Arash Bakhshandehpour. Today, I am joined by Mark Hyder. Mark is the CEO over in Innova Health. Mark, thank you for joining.
Thanks for having me, Arash. Glad to be
Yeah,
here.
I'm excited to jump in. Mark, before we jump into the Innova of it all, help share a little bit about yourself, who you are, how you ended up getting all the way of where you are now with Innova as well.
It's an interesting story because being the CEO of Innova Health Tech would have been as much a surprise to me as a younger version as anybody. I actually am a physical therapist by background. I have a doctorate in physical therapy, and I specifically went into physical therapy so I could avoid all things computer and all things tech.
We got
I
you.
I I thought I was going to avoid that whole thing and get through my career without doing that. But I had an interesting career, and I really went into long-term care, skilled nursing, assisted living, therapy, doing those type of things. Helped run a company, helped start a company, was a COO for a therapy company, was over skilled nursing facilities, reimbursement and therapy for a long time. Ended up doing some consulting, and then had a friend call me up and say, "Hey, would you be interested in working for us as a COO? Would you come talk to us?" Which I did, and which was great, and it was very interesting. And one of the things I've done over my career is I've really focused on team building. So I thought, what works in one setting generally works in another as far as team building. So I thought, why not? I went and talked to them. They made me an offer, and about 6 months later, asked me to step into the CEO role. And there you go. So I've always been open to whatever comes up next, and so here I am, a tech leader, a therapy background. But fortunately, over the last 30 years, it's been nothing but tech, right? It's been transitioned from paper documentation, paper reporting, to then going over to spreadsheets, then moving into electronic documentation of some sort on templates. And now, the whole crazy world with AI and all that stuff that you guys love to do, which fortunately I do too at this point, but it's been an evolution.
Yeah, I'm sure there was this funny little thing called the fax machine back when you got kicked off, Mark, for those that aren't privy to those. Yeah,
Skilled
it's
nursing,
funny.
it's skilled nursing facilities. There still are fax machines because there are physicians that refuse to give them up.
Can't do away with them. Can't do away with them. Yeah, you can try to avoid tech all you want, but it is everywhere. To
It
to
is.
your point. So let's speak about Innova a little bit. You and I have had some offline conversations. Innova, I'm going to try to summarize it in one sentence and tell me if I misstep here. But Innova Health is an EHR operating system. EHR is electronic health records operating system for acute care facilities. So these are post general care or emergency care facilities, things like retirement homes, things like assisted living facilities of that sort. Is that right?
Very close. So it's post acute care. Acute care would be
Post acute care.
so once you leave the hospital, it's skilled nursing, assisted living, some outpatient, those type of settings.
Got it. And so you stepped in. It's been close to a year or so since you first kind of stepped in with Innova Health. Help paint the picture about what the ecosystem looked like before these EHR operating systems that exist for post-acute care facilities. What did it look like before technology kind of hit the market?
It was a lot of post-it notes.
Yeah.
There was a lot of people walking around with clipboards, writing notes, people with lists in their pockets. And if you look closely, a lot of the therapists my age still have a paper list in their pocket, still doing that. But
Yeah.
it really was troublesome. The biggest problem being is you would go and treat your clients, you'd work with them most of the day, and then you would sit down and try to document, which means recreating and really thinking through what did I do and what was the response and what's the most meaningful piece out of that and getting that down on paper. And as you can imagine, I was a professional witness for a while, and I had to review hundreds of charts. If you could imagine deciphering handwriting,
Good luck.
it was crazy. It was crazy. So if they wrote a good note, being able to read that good note was questionable. So there were a lot of flaws. And obviously, without templates, there was no cut and paste, but people would get in the habit of writing the same note over and over because it's time sensitive, and trying to recreate it. It's very problematic.
And then, so that's historical sense. We'll call it
Mhm.
pre-tech. And there's this innovation that's happened in the market over the last half a decade or so with these systems that have been introduced. So as Innova Health has been in market, and as you've kind of stepped in and been able to assess the ecosystem, how are you looking at differentiation in a market that has been adapting to these systems?
That's a great question. Because it's a little bit difficult to differentiate yourself in a market where, things have been evolving for quite a while. Now, one of the things is a lot of these systems are quite old. They were developed on old technology. There's a lot of technical debt. It's very difficult to adopt new technology. The other thing is they build and build and build and build, so a lot of what they've built is either really old and antiquated, or there are so many things like, 1,000 reports. How do I find the report that I want? You know, there are performance issues. There are workarounds. That's one of my pet peeves is hearing my team talk about workarounds. I hate it's like a curse word. I don't want to hear workaround. That means something
It
doesn't
hurts.
work. But one of the advantages the younger companies like Innova have is being number one, cloud native. So you're not working off old platforms. You're not worried about that. And the other piece now, being AI native is an advantage as well because you're able to adopt new technology, which means you can make changes more quickly. They're less problematic. And depending on your architecture, you're able to go in and you're able to add items and features that even a year ago would have required a lot of hard coding and was really dependent on the quality of the developer who was coding that.
I'm hearing you talk about cloud native and hard coding. You are really a tech guy, Mark. You weren't kidding. Times have changed. So I'd love to hear about, because a lot of the people that I speak to in these conversations and also just through my agency are frontline founders of the businesses that they are actively speaking to me about. And while you have in the past, you've founded businesses, you had a consulting firm as well. And what you talked about was the thing that you enjoyed was building out teams and building out these processes and assessing the systems and et cetera, et cetera. As you came in to Innova, how did you go about kind of stack ranking or building out a prioritization of the things that you wanted to work on or that you wanted to modify or update or revise?
One of the things that's very difficult for any tech leader, any tech company to really put their arms around is going back and asking your customers what they want. Because what a lot of customers will want to do is they'll want you to recreate what they've already had, just make it a little bit better, right? And so one of the things that I've tried to do is be really problem oriented and really what are the pain points? There's one of the really founders of real strategy, Richard Remote, always goes back to looking at the problem. What's the problem that you're trying to address? So if you're trying to come up with a strategy, you got to come up with the right problem and identify that problem or the crux. Otherwise, you're really spinning your wheels. So what we're doing is really identifying the problem, and then we are going back and we are really engineering, we're creating the solution so that we're not recreating a solution somebody else has brought to market. We're really creating a better solution. And like I said, some of the tools have been introduced even in the last 6 months have enabled us to do it more quickly and more directly. It's easier to identify the problem and the solution and then validate the outcome. Can we validate that it actually works? And even that has become easier to do in the recent weeks.
There was an executive earlier in my career when I first got in tech and SaaS, and something he kept going back to in every conversation with every iteration of the tool or platform that we played with was, what's our North Star? What is the problem that we're trying to solve for? What is the clear value proposition, especially as, let's say, like the competitive landscape becomes more competitive, as things begin to get a little bit more commoditized. Maybe the addressable market expands, and then you can lose sight of who you're actually building for pretty easily when you're going through that phase for businesses. And I've also been on the other side of that, of businesses that maybe lost sight of the North Star. And to your point, the easiest thing you can do if you have an existing client base is go to them. Hey, what's the feedback? What parts of the platform you're using? What parts are ineffective? What parts of it are nice to have, not need to haves? we're considering about building this. This is what our product roadmap might look like. Some businesses are really scared of sharing that with customers because of maybe the feedback they might get or the direction they're building is incorrect. But there is no better way to validate or invalidate a direction you're trying to take a company.
And I appreciate that. It brings the thought. A friend of mine who used to constantly just pound on me, love the problem, not the solution. So if you love your solution, our solution is the best, it's the solution for everybody, you lose that North Star because the North Star is the problem that you're solving. And so one of the things that I teach to my company is Innova Health Tech is not an app. It's us. And one of the things that we use to solve problems is the app that we've devised, that SaaS product. But once we start believing that SaaS product is Innova Health Tech, then we lose sight of that North Star because we start thinking that our solution is universal. It should be a great solution, but we want to go back to what's the problem, and even better, what's the next problem? And what do we
Right.
anticipate the next problem? Because we've got to be looking down the road. Otherwise, we're old, we're outdated almost immediately.
Especially in a competitive landscape.
Oh, yeah.
I think that's the piece. You alluded to it a couple times already as you've been speaking, but the barrier of entry to building new technology has been reduced exponentially. The barrier to iteration has been reduced even more so on tooling and platforming. And that's just a matter of we're only a few years into this AI boom so far, right? Like,
Yeah.
what is this going to look like over the next 3 to 5 to 6 years as we kind of forecast this out? So to your point, North Star, and then future-proof yourself. What are the downstream problems that we're going to be solving for down the line? Excuse me. So we've talked about your career journey, and we'll call it the courting process of what happened earlier on with Innova, and then you stepping in the first 6 months on the operational front, and then fully stepping into the CEO role over the last 5 or 6 months as well. And let's say over these last 12 months, for CEOs or executives that step into companies that have existed, if you were able to pull a singular insight, just one, that you would share with a room full of peers that are in that same seat, what's the insight you share?
I think the most important thing to me was really know your vision. And that's separate from, loving the solution. It's really know your vision, because what you have to do is you have to bring technology together with the right people, with the right team dynamics. And as a new leader, if you're stepping into an established team, you have to really be able to assess their performance and really make sure that that's your team, that they're able to do those things that are part of your vision and that vision that you're bringing to the company. And that doesn't mean that you're closed off to everybody else's ideas, but I think you have to hold that standard high, and you have to make sure that that's an unwavering standard, whatever it is and whatever industry you're in. In tech, it really has to be that ability to change. And one of the things I look at, and I'm really adamant about, is looking at that. There's a whole book called Adversity Quotient. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
looking at a team's ability to adapt, be resilient, to not only deal with change, but thrive through change and look to it as a catalyst for improvement. And so I think bringing your skill set, bringing your vision, and being able to pull those pieces together is really important. The other thing is, and I'm not saying that this is my ultimate strength, but you have to be a little bit fearless, because things are going to happen. And if you're stepping into a situation where things aren't working well, you have to be fearless enough to make those changes and stick with your decisions. Make the decision and stand by it until there's a better decision to be made. And that's one of the hardest things, because people are used to a certain dynamic, a certain tone from their leadership, even where the benchmarks are. And
Oh, yeah.
changing those is difficult.
Oh, yeah.
So,
It can be jarring
oh yeah, yeah.
for team members. Yeah.
And one of the most difficult things I learned as a young leader is dealing with change is difficult for everybody. But as a leader, you're often the one who's the catalyst for change. You're creating change. And so
Executing it.
if you're
Yeah.
looking to avoid chaos and avoid change, you don't want to be a leader, because that's part of your job, is
Yeah.
introducing change and then enforcing that change or managing the change, whatever term you want to use. to make sure that things happen.
Yeah. It's funny you say that. I reflect, I won't name names and I won't refer to companies that I've worked at, but I had a leader in my career that was he was the messenger for a lot of changes that were implemented that came from seats above him. As far as processes, it was part of the sales org. So as far as processes and territories and quota structures and team structures, and a lot of them were by the team. We challenged it with each other, but it was there was such a confidence in the way that it was communicated to us, and a reassurance in the way that it was communicated to us that it's like, hey, this is the guy that we're following into battle, and he believes the things that he's relaying down to us. Like, let's buckle up. And it was a reassuring thing. After I no longer worked there, I'd cross paths with him, and I'd poke a little bit about, oh, these are things that I'm also doing that I learned from our time spent at this previous employer. I'm like, it's pretty challenging. How do you own that? And he's like, that's how you know I'm a good sales leader. He's like, I d- he's like, I didn't think some of those things were good ideas, but we had to do them because we needed to implement, like we needed a catalyst for change. And so it's really funny hearing that, and also having gone through that evolution myself in my career. Um, Mark, what do the next 6 to 12 months look like for Innova?
We're just finishing up a really cool rebuild on a lot of our features. And like I said, we're, being cloud native, AI native, using some of those tools to make sure that what we're building is very scalable, it's fast,
Yep.
it's reliable, and it does exactly what we tell people it's going to do. It's one of the things I've really made sure that we're doing. We're not selling something that doesn't work. We're not promising things that don't work. So it really is making sure that works exactly like we say it's going to. And those little iterations that always come after a reintroduction, and making sure that there is an advantage to using our system. There has to be an obvious, and everybody talks about a 10x. What's that 10x advantage?
Yeah,
And I think somebody pulled that out of their hat, but
I think so.
they're not wrong. Part of that is, what's the thought behind it, and
Yep.
where will we be with this application 1, 2, 3 years from now, so that when people really put their trust in us, that there is a payoff, not just today, but over the upcoming years.
Well, especially in your ecosystem, because in our conversations offline, you've kind of alluded to it's become standard in your ecosystem for these not just singular year contracts. There's a lot of multi-year contracting that comes with that, right?
There,
So to kind of reassure if it's a platform replacement, one where you're replacing an incumbent, there needs to be this almost long-term buy-in with the prospects and businesses that you're going to be supporting.
Absolutely, absolutely, and you want to partner up with people you trust. So part
Yeah,
of it is the
no
app.
question,
The other
no question.
people is or the part is the
The
people,
people.
and you trust
Yep,
those people, and do they do what they say they're gonna do? Predictability is good for the app as well as the people that support that app. So really being
relationships.
and being reliable.
No question. Couldn't agree more. So another one I want to pull from a little bit, just from your career that you alluded to earlier, and I want to dig into because I have a chance to kind of pick your brain on this one. So you talked about you love building teams, you love building processes. What goes into building the best team, state of the art team, top notch?
State of art. It is, you know, years ago, I'm going to go back to a book I read, The Contrarian's Guide to Leadership. Stephen
Okay,
Sample, he was the president of USC for quite a while and took them to dominance in a lot of fields, not only athletics, but really
academics.
research and academics. And really, what he talked about was surrounding himself with the right people. That was his first job when he walked into USC was, I've got to make sure that I have people around me who really represent me and my approach. If I don't, this whole change system doesn't work.
Yeah,
So now the key is you can't just walk in one day and let everybody go,
yeah,
right? That's a bad thing for any
totally.
company, any system. So you really have to start looking at what are your biggest challenges, and then who are your best performers, and making sure your best performers understand they're doing a great job. And then your challenges, for me, it's always coaching. I want to coach, I want to mentor, I want to teach, train, help people to be successful first. And then they're going to either rule themselves in or out, right?
Yeah,
They're either making it, they're not. But it really is about the right people. And people talk about the right seat on the bus. It's 100% correct. And if they don't represent your values as a leader, they shouldn't be part of your team. That's a
yeah,
hard thing though when you have really important roles or people filling important roles. And there has to be a change there. And one of my other favorite leaders, it was what a mentor of mine used to say, Mark, you either need to change people or change people. And it really does boil
It's
down to
good.
that, right?
Yeah.
You're
Yep.
going to change them to do what they need to do, or you're going to, find somebody to do that job. And so I look at it that way and think that is my job, is to change people or change people. And if I do that well, and I have the right vision, I'm going to attract the right people around me, and they'll actually come work. And I've been fortunate enough as I've moved to different positions to have people who wanted to follow me, which
Yep.
makes it so much easier,
You got
right?
it good.
Much
Yeah.
easier.
Yeah. That's a testament to you, Mark.
Nah, they're good people. Good people.
They similar that actually the same sales leader that I was just referencing earlier. He heavily indexed on Pareto's law, which is 80% of 80% of outputs are dictated by 20% of inputs. But he would look at that from a talent perspective. It's like I'm going to get majority of my results from the best top of the bucket talent. I'm going to prioritize my time there. And if the rest with minimal resources or less resources, not minimal, with
Yeah,
less resources can rise as well, awesome. That's the right talent. But
yeah,
organically, some of those people, to your point, just don't make it.
yeah,
It's a matter of the environment. One of my last questions for you. So we've talked about it a little bit as we've discussed market changes and market shifts, but AI is top of mind for everyone. It has been for about 3.5 years, especially, and even now with the updates with Claude, the numerous general AI platforms, and now even specialized AI platforms that exist out there. How are you and the Innova team taking AI into consideration, either if it's on the product front or just on a day-to-day operation front?
The other day when you and I were talking, you used the same word that I use all the time. There's a sexy part of AI that
Yeah.
everybody wants to see.
Oh yeah.
And then there's that quiet AI. And one of the things that I decided right off the bat, knowing that we were going to rebuild a lot of our features, was that we need to make sure that we weren't using AI to hide some of our flaws. So one of the things that we did is we went back and we look at our workflow. We look at our documentation flow. We look at our billing flow and make sure that it's simplified. Now, can you use AI to do that? Actually, you can use AI to help you do that. But then when you implement that, you can layer on AI to just streamline and even make it flow even better. So you're not trying to use AI to resolve technical debt that was better solved by human minds and doing it better. So we looked at the workflow first and said, we got to do that, make sure it makes sense. And then we're going to use AI to make the workflow even faster, more intuitive, and use some agentic applications to make sure that it continues to get better. Now, the other piece of it is that sexy piece that everybody wants to see, the guided documentation, the instant auditing, the ambient listening, stuff like that. It's good stuff. It works well. It'll work better, like ambient listening with the diarization. It's getting better, but it still pulls in extraneous conversations, stuff like that. So you really have to have some safeguards even for that to make sure that what's being pulled into your system, somebody reviews and make sure that it's accurate and complete and then signs off on it. Everybody's going for that sexy thing, and it's interesting, Rosh, the people that I see talking about those sexy things, I'm a little bit worried that they're actually the ones that are still testing it out. They're not real comfortable with AI, and they're not really looking at AI as a full complete tool. That really, those quiet things it does are probably the most important.
The most rudimentary stuff. Yeah. And
Absolutely.
especially right now. We're not talking maybe a few years down the line, things might change. They probably will. But especially right now, I couldn't agree more. It's also an observation that I have in a lot of these conversations that I'm having. Okay, Mark. So zoom out, and I'd like to hear from you, whether it's over the next 6 to 12 months or even today. What do you want the reputation of Innova to be? Two people cross paths. One person talks about Innova at a coffee shop, and the other person chimes in and says, "What's that?" How do you want them to speak about it?
You know, I'll tell you how I want them to describe it. Okay. And I want people to be absolutely thrilled with what we're doing. But here's what I want them to think about us when they're outside of work. Actually, I don't want them to have to think about us when they're outside. I don't want them to worry about us at all. So it's a quiet confidence that when they go home at night, their documentation's complete, it's accurate, their billing's complete, it's accurate. They don't have to worry about what they did at work. They can go home and enjoy their life. So if I get to that point and people say, I love using it because when I leave, I never think about it, best compliment I could receive.
There you go. It's a trust layer. I love it.
Absolutely.
Well, Mark, I appreciate you. And I'm really glad we were able to make this time as well as the conversations offline that we've had. Really excited for you and the Innova team. For anyone interested, you can find Mark on LinkedIn, Mark Hyder, Hyder, and keep an eye on Innova Health. That's Innova with two N's. Cheers, Mark.
Cheers.
All right.